Hi everyone, welcome back to the Rollback Café. And as if you have come across what rollback is, I'm pretty sure that you have by mistake pushed something to the production which wasn't supposed to, or um, released something which broke your pipeline. So that's what we are here for. We'll discuss around our conversations on how we broke things or problems that we fixed. And in today's episode, we have Brian with us. So a brief about Brian. He's a co-leader with Minimum CD.org. He is a CD thought leader. That's what I believe him to be. He's a Walmart dojo and definitely an advocate for reducing sad DevOps. So hi Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how's it going? And
It's
actually,
going great.
all I am is a developer who's trying to make my pain and other people's pains less. It's really what I am.
So, just a small curiosity I had before we deep dive into the podcast. So,
Sure.
when first you heard about CD and um, then there is a minimum CD and then the SAT DevOps, what was your journey like? How did you came till advocating about SAT DevOps?
So CDE was an answer to a business problem we had at Walmart. I worked at Walmart for almost 20 years, and for the first 15, I worked in logistics systems, and we were responsible for the warehouses, which is people don't know this, but Walmart's a logistics company and
Right.
not a retailer.
Super. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we measured how long it took to fulfill a business request for a new feature. It took
Mhm.
12 months. We were delivering 3 to 4 times a year. Every delivery required at least a week of 24-hour war room on-site support. And nightmarish. At one point, I led the team that was responsible for merging 400 branches every quarter for the quarterly release. And so our EVP came to us as the senior engineers in the area and said, "I really need this fix, and I really need you guys to figure out how we can deploy every 2 weeks instead of every quarter." I hadn't heard of continuous delivery before that point. The book had been out for about 4 years, and we had Agile, and we'd gone through several Agile transformations, and we were currently suffering through a SAFe implementation. I hate Scaled Agile Framework a lot, and so I and one of the other senior engineers took the lead on how do we get that done. I wrote an article for InfoQ, and I'm not going to repeat everything because there's a lot to it. You don't just go from quarterly release to daily release. But we went for daily release as the goal and not every 2 weeks. And worked for about 18 months on all of the
Revampings and
tooling, the behaviors, everything else to get to the point where the team I was leading was delivering one of the core products for the system. We were delivering we were delivering daily 5 to 10 times at one point. I had metrics I was tracking. So we had 5 to 10 releases across our services. That's how I came across continuous delivery. The thing is that the journey that we went on to do that, all the learning we had to do, improved the culture of the team morale, the business outcomes, and everything else. Later, I was asked to move to platform, where we were trying to use continuous delivery as the method for elevating how people worked across the enterprise. I was originally in charge of the metrics tool that we were using to track how people were doing on their journey to CD. And we were trying to gamify that because at the scale of Walmart, you can't go from team to team to team and say, "Hey, how's CD going?" We instrumented it and then tried to incentivize it. And then people would come to me asking how to improve their scores. And so my boss told me to start a dojo in the model of Target and Verizon and several other companies had done, where it's not agile coaching. It's let's fix everything,
at once.
Yeah, I mean, So I gathered together some other senior engineers on my team, and we acted kind of like the test mercenaries at Google. So we
Hmm.
parachute into your team, join your team as team members for 6 weeks, help you get on the path to, help you identify where your problems were, get you on the path to continuous integration, help you with test structure, application architecture, all the things to get you up and running while constantly broadcasting information to the rest of the organization and trying to find ways to help everybody else. And then go to the next team or, work on things that scaled better, but that was our job, was to try to figure out how to get teams from wherever they were to daily delivery.
Makes sense. Since you just mentioned about the metrics and how uh, in the team you were required to like define those Dora metrics, um,
So this
as per
predates
se.
Dora. Dora metrics weren't a
Oh,
thing. Yeah.
so like what metrics did you track, and like key metrics, if you can mention, which you used to track that time?
So when we work with a team, number one, at least in a large organization, teams don't necessarily have control over how often they deploy, but they do
Hmm.
have control over everything up to that point as a team. Okay. And so we would
Hmm.
focus on continuous integration and building out the quality
Uh,
process in the pipeline, because continuous integration they had full control over, and most of what you need for CD is wrapped up in CI. Most of the
yes,
problems,
yes.
right? And so the thing that's really cool about continuous delivery, if you take it seriously, it's like shining a giant spotlight out under the rug that you lifted up and seeing all the problems, and then we just solve those, right? And so
Right.
we would the way we operated as Dojo is we had 2.5 day sprints. Every 2.5 days we would deliver, or we would figure out why we had what we had to fix so we could deliver. We focused on how do we slice things really small, how do we define code in a nice testable way, how do we get that code integrated at least daily, and exercise that muscle. So the metrics we would use would be how long it took to get a story from started to done. And I'm using story loosely for each. Just task. How long would it take an
Makes
average
sense.
task on the team to get from started to done? We were aiming for 2 days or less as a goal, as a target. And there's some things that you can target as goals that way that actually will drive better outcomes as long as you have offsetting guardrail metrics. Okay, we would
Makes sense.
we would track how frequently code was integrating to the trunk, and we tracked defect rates. And we tracked this over the 6 weeks so the teams could see how that they were improving, and show their management that they were actually improving, because it was very expensive. We'd have to slow a team down to do this, but then they would accelerate rapidly. One of the side effects of having a dojo engagement was we had a very high correlation of tech leads getting promoted after we left. So we were doing a pretty good job of elevating people's skills. Um, and so we would focus on the metrics around CI because the team could control the metrics around CI.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That makes sense. Um, you mentioned about trunk space, feature release, and deployment.
Mhm.
Um, if you have to compare it with the environment-based one, would you be a pro trunk-based or a pro environment-based
You never
in
want
terms of purely deployment?
that. So you have to think about what it is you're trying to do with continuous delivery. All right, and I think people would
Right.
be well served by actually reading the book before they come up with a way to implement it. Because with continuous delivery, we're not testing the code. We're testing everything about the actual artifact, this artifact that we're deploying. And so if I am deploying different branches per environment, I'm not testing the artifact. I'm testing the code I'm testing entirely different artifact,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so you're not doing CD. You're doing something else entirely. And so with continuous delivery, it's incredibly important. We build once and then test through all the environments. If that artifact passes, it's deployable. If it doesn't pass, it's dead. And there's
Makes
tooling
sense.
that you need to implement to get that done. Not much tooling, But it's that core concept. Also, you don't, if something fails in one environment, you don't fix whatever's broken. Say, oh, well, there was a database configuration that was wrong or something. You don't fix it there and then continue. You go back to version control, fix it there, and then build a new artifact. Yeah, and people really struggle with this when they haven't read the book and be very hardcore about this, this quality aspect of it.
I think still there's a lot of debate. Personally, I have seen environment based in couple of open source projects purely which are trying to be an enterprise version, and I think the place there where they lag is they maintain different branches for very too long, which after a point then there's a high chance that it's conflictable at that point, because the version histories are different, the commits are different, what they're testing and staging when merged into development, what they're testing development gets merged to staging, it's something new. Staging merged into the main, it's something new. And that's how they're trying to make faster release. But some point I don't think that's very helpful.
It's exactly the wrong thing to do. It's never helpful. And I think it's also important. I've talked to teams, because in the dojo I spent 4 years talking to different teams and having arguments with tech leads in different areas. And you'd have these tech leads who say, well, this is how open source does it, because they'd be using fork and pull. They'd literally be using private forks on teamwork, which is insane. Right. But they say, well, this is how open source does it. And I would have to explain to them that we are not building an open source product. Open source is designed around all the contributors or untrusted contributors. That you as a team are working together and you're trying to communicate as rapidly as possible. Open source does not use CI on purpose, but it's also the most expensive way to develop software. And the only way it's economically viable is because the labor is free.
Right, that's true.
Right, but because we are very expensive people when we're professional developers and writing code for money, you use continuous integration on the team. And you have to use continuous integration workflows. That includes trunk-based development. And it includes, you may have a release branch if you're having strict versions. So let me give you an example. When we were deploying to the distribution centers, you're deploying to the edge. It's not cloud. And so we would have 2 to 3 versions rolling across the distribution chain at any one time. Because you don't want to deploy to everywhere all at once, right? You've got, it's risk. And so from risk mitigation point of view, you've got version 1, version 2, and you're starting out in version 3, and you have all of them going out. Well, you may have to make a patch to version 1, okay, which means we're going to cut a release branch for version 1. We're going to make a fix to the trunk, cherry pick that fix to version 1, and then make sure that versions 2 and 3 also get it by pushing the
it's always in a two-way sync.
Well, no, it's not a two-way sync. You always make the fix to the trunk and then push it up to a release branch if you have a release branch. Okay?
Yeah.
But that way you make sure you have no regression, because version 5 will still have version 1's fix, even though version 5 doesn't exist yet. Right? And so you might have to have release branches based off of version numbers, because if you're doing a pattern like that where it's not to the cloud. Okay. But if you're deploying where you don't have to track versions, you really want to deploy frequently and from the head on trunk.
And that's another, I agree that it will make much more sense. Since just something that I wanted to have a better understanding. When you say you implemented Dojo at the Walmart, what was the approach that you took, and how was it different compared to the traditional methods that we currently have, the normal training that everyone does in the team?
Oh yeah, so number one, there's 2 kinds of training I've seen. One is where you have like Scrum Master, Agile Coach people who aren't technical coming in talking to you about Scrum process. I mean, honestly, it's like how to do Scrum. We didn't care about Scrum. We cared about delivery. The
Mm-hmm.
other approach is you go to class and you learn something. The
Mm-hmm.
approach to the dojo is there's two things. Number one, we're using your work. You're not doing something like Pivotal where you would come into Pivotal and use Pivotal's work to learn how to work. You're working on your work in your environment. We're coming in. We learn your thing
Uh,
enough. Okay. So we come in and say, okay, what's your application architecture? What's your? We'd find out what the escalation path was in case we had mockers. We would start with a value stream map to find out where are the actual problems and the process to deliver. And then we'd start tackling those problems with you as members of your
that's
team,
nice.
as engineers who can sit down and pair program with you on a test and show you,
That's nice.
okay, and do that kind of work.
I think
And so, and then
it
also
was.
the 2.5 day sprints were very important because that forced you to think small.
Hmm.
And it forced you to focus on the problem and get a lot of clarity. So we're not cycling through trying to figure out what we should be doing. It's how to do it.
Makes sense. I think uh, from what I could understand, it does help a lot of positive environment into the team as well, because now uh, not like in task, if it's a urgent or critical, it won't be just dependent on single person. Now the whole team is involved, right? So that
That's also
um,
that's so important that people see it as this is the team's work.
yes.
We've had, I was telling someone the other day about a team. We had to go to the manager and overcome management problems because he was measuring people on how many tickets they were closing, which meant it wasn't the team's work. It was that, individuals' work, which meant that I'm not, if doing code review meant that I'm hurting my own metrics and getting
Yeah,
possibly set up for getting trimmed off the bottom of the bell curve. Being a senior engineer, helping a junior engineer would hurt my metrics. So why would I do that? I mean, it destroys teamwork to do that. You have to see it as the team's work.
makes sense. Makes sense. I think I get that point, but in that scenario, the only uh, thing that I can imagine is faster release, but with more bugs. Because I have spent my time to review so that my metrics doesn't get hurt. I have reviewed fast enough, maybe couple of, rather than a detailed feedback, just the highlights. If they have fixed it, it's merged, and then maybe sometimes the testing is also skipped.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not working as a team to do this correctly, you definitely it will. Well, but you touch on another thing though is that we're not going for faster release. That's the mistake a lot of all people also make. We're going for smaller release.
Right.
Now you have to do it more
Small
frequently to
versions.
make it smaller, but the goal is smaller because it's much harder to hide problems in small things than it is in big things.
Big things. Right. That's
And so by making everything as small as we can reasonably make it, it's easier to ensure the quality is happening. And not just by having somebody test something small. It starts in the very beginning with how we define the work as small pieces and make sure we understand what the work is in a way where we can then do test-driven development because we have a very high understanding of what the work is. Very hard to do TDD if you have the vague requirements, right?
that's true.
So quality starts at the requirements definition and then processes all the way through the entire flow to the end, including when something breaks in production, because it will, the actions we take to remediate that so it's less likely to break that way in the future. It's all one
I
process.
understand. Yeah, I get that. Um, so right now we're talking about CD with application testing. But what about databases? Since with Dojo, with the implementation of Dojo, I'm sure not just the application lifecycle, but as a whole, complete SDLC, including testing, database migration would have, uh, there would have been some impact. So how did you, uh, I forgot the word, but how did you mention or keep the track that everything is working in a fixed manner so that maybe my changes is getting merged, my DB doesn't break, or if there's a migration, adding something new, the database is interrupted.
So part of that is defining upfront. I mean, so step one, if you're on this path of we're going to do continuous delivery, is defining upfront all the things that have to be validated.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and so we define our definition of releasable, the validations that are required to meet that definition, and then we start automating those validations. So the example you gave, somebody recently, I was at DevOps Days Dallas recently, and someone asked me how many environments you should have. I said, what kind of tests are you going to run? So if we're making a database change, we have to have a way to validate that we made that database change successfully as part of the pipeline.
Right.
Now it's either a database change that's leading, that's, depending on your architecture, it may not be part of the application that you're deploying. But then in that case, how do you validate the database change is there? You have to have a test to make sure the database change is there before you deploy. So you define how you're going to validate that these things are true, and then you automate those, including including the tooling for the database. So it's in version control. Everything should be buildable from version control.
That was the actual reason why I asked this question, because nowadays we have a lot of different database migration tools, particularly ORMs. Day by day, different ORMs are coming up, whether and language specific as well. So
Well, and you don't even have to use. There's tools other than ORMs you can use as well. I mean, I've done it both ways. Someone was asking about this the other day, and I pointed them to Liquibase. Liquibase isn't an ORM, but it is an open source tool for managing database change, and so it just depends on what you're trying to do.
So at Harness, what we have started is we have our internal orchestration, like Kubernetes is an orchestration for our application. We have got this tool called Database DevOps that orchestrates our database migration, which includes like Flyway. At the base level, it uses Flyway, Liquibase, so it has a compatibility with both of them, and then you can orchestrate that. So yeah, that's what where I was coming to. So with different ORMs, there's always an issue with version compatibility and drivers compatibility. And I was going to ask, does any tools do help in mitigating those? So where definitely the Liquibase, Flyway, Bytebase, I think there's like Django SQL, if it's Harness Database DevOps would come in.
I don't have any specific tool solutions. What I do have is patterns, right? It's like what can fail? How can we validate that failure occurred or didn't? And how do we add that to the pipeline? I mean, that's going to be my standard answer, because there's so many different ways different things can fail. There's never a right tool. There's always just the best tool we have right now.
Yes.
Which will change.
Which fits our solution case.
Yeah, but it comes down to what are the possible failure modes, and how do we validate that those have happened or not?
Makes sense. Let's come into a fun section. I think that is what I was waiting for, and I'm pretty sure the audience will also be waiting for. It's the sad DevOps. We had this conversation about how before the Walmart Dojo exercise, and from personal experience of our board, we know that CD is a pain point for a lot of developers, not the DevOps, but the developers. So what, in your view, what do you think is the source of that problem today?
Oh, well,
that
I
still
think
exists?
I think the source of the problem is that we have, and so the reason for scaled agile DevOps maturity framework was what the thing you're talking about is that people will, executives will hire in consultants to impose agile process and methodology on teams.
Mm-hmm.
And you get all this focus on how do we, especially in a large scaling environment, and where SAFe is really popular, you get all this focus on how do we coordinate teams together? How do we make sure they're all in lockstep so that we don't have any dependency problems and that sort of thing? Which means that we're going to be driving up the size of every single change set. I'm trying to manage all this with process instead of with engineering. And it makes continuous delivery nearly impossible. I've never met anybody who works in a safe environment who can actually do CD for you. But when you start focusing instead of how do we manage all this into, okay, what's preventing us from doing delivery? And then you start looking at the big problem with delivery is, okay, well, number one, it's a lot easier to deliver individual sports cars than it is to deliver a train full of sports cars.
Right.
So instead of having a train put together, we modify things so that we can manage the dependencies with code and engineering instead of trying to just handle those dependencies in the code and trying to manage everything with process. So like when we were starting this, because that allows you to have a lot more freedom as a team to improve things, and so you're not tightly coupled. So you've got all these loosely coupled teams that can then deliver. Well, so this is a big architectural thing, especially when people do microservice decomposition that they screw up. Is that every component of the system needs to be individually deployable in any sequence, and if you follow that rule strictly, that every component's individually deployable in any sequence, then continuous delivery is mostly just about the quality process for each component. Everything else is a lot easier. But trying to do it, we couldn't have ever done continuous delivery on a logistics system when you had dozens of teams with 400 developers all just kind of working on the same thing in feature teams. That never would have worked.
Makes sense. I think what you mentioned about what should I say, like features as a train or shipping in a train format rather than a sports car format.
The mistake people make is, we have to deliver this entire feature at once, and it's going to take all these things to. But no, so if you story at once, I just have to deliver non-breaking code
first, yes.
Right? And so let's say that you're in a large distributed system, and then a new feature is going to take 10 different services to change. They're owned by 5 different teams. All we have to do is coordinate on the interface changes and then engineer the change in such a way that we're backward compatible. That's it. And then when the last team delivers, we can turn on the feature, everything works. And so that allows everybody to go at the speed they can go at.
I think that is something I believe maybe a lot of teams have started to adopt, especially in case of enterprises, and hopefully in the next couple of years, I somewhere see that even the small teams, whether it's a small startups or a mid-sized enterprise stage, they will also have to pick that annotation, because with AI coming in, especially, but not just in DevOps but in general, people want fixes much faster than the features. It should be, if I'm able to make it work, I know that anyone in my team should be able to ship it as much accurately, if it's the right word, accurately without much friction.
So AI is a double-edged sword, and there's a lot of us out here who are those people who are talking about things, right? Who are hands-on trying things out, and the problem with AI is it amplifies your current state. Okay, if you have poor engineering, it amplifies your poor engineering. If you have good engineering, it amplifies your good engineering. And it all comes down to, and when I talk about engineering, I'm talking about the rigor and discipline you use to develop software. Okay, and so it doesn't. I would be very leery about applying AI before we get good at the basics of things like test-driven development, continuous integration, keeping the batches small, building up the habits of continuous delivery, and then apply AI in that environment. But I gave a talk last week at DevOps Days Dallas about or week before last now. Wow, time is just flying. Anyway, about the fact that even if you do have good engineering and you can accelerate a team, but you have bad information coming into the team when you have a really crappy delivery process downstream of the team, all you're going to do is drive up risk because now you've accelerated the generation of code. Well, that's not the goal. The goal is delivery, and with low risk, you have to improve the entire value stream. You can't just improve coding.
Makes sense. It's a whole process that I think one should validate first before just hopping onto and then starting to use AI when they're
you just have to build those muscles of being of understanding extreme programming before you dive into applying trying to get AI to drive stuff. And I get really frustrated I'm going to get less frustrated these days because all it is people telling me that I don't have to compete against them for a job. Is that people are out there talking about how it just generates garbage code. Well, no, you are generating garbage code with it. I am not. I've spent the last year making my living generating code that wasn't garbage with it and working on the skill to get better at that and learning what's good and bad and learning what's model problems, what's my problems. Right? And all it does is make you really dig in and get double down on good engineering if you know what that looks like. You have to be less lazy. So, yeah, I think AI is something we have to dig into, but we have to understand that it amplifies your current level of competence.
Yes. And if they are able to harness it.
Sorry?
If they are able... I meant just adding on to it, if developers are able to actually utilize and not depend on AI, then it does amplify their both productivity plus as well as their skills.
Yeah, I mean, so because I know how to describe things as tests, it's because I know how to do acceptance test-driven development. I can deliver code a lot faster. I can spend hours instead of days building something. And so what that means is two things. I mean, one, it means I can get stuff done faster, but it also means from a company's point of view, and this is what people need to understand, AI alone won't take your job. But if I can do the work of 3 people, I will take your job.
That's true. And that's the actual correct or the phrase which people should focus more on.
This is a new skill they need to master, and it's moving very quickly. Be on the leading edge, not on the trailing edge. There's one other thing that you wanted to talk about earlier, but I want to make sure we didn't leave out, was minimumcd.org. Because that was a conference project we put together because people were just not doing continuous delivery correctly, and they were getting hurt. So we'd be talking to people on LinkedIn, and they talk about how continuous delivery had been banned in their organization, or they were seeing massive quality problems, or all these things. And so we sat down and came up with, literally the problem that what we were trying to come up with was a set of problems that you needed to solve so that you could achieve continuous delivery safely. And so it's the minimum set of behaviors that you needed for continuous delivery, but the intent was solve these problems and we broke it down in a way so you should be able to solve it in a way where you had change control along the way. It was an iterative approach to achieving continuous delivery that would, again, shine a spotlight on where the actual problems you had were, so that you could start just doing relentless improvement on solving those problems with the goal of improving outcomes for your customers, your organization, and the people doing the work. And that was the goal of minimumcd.org. We've gotten a lot of feedback over the years as people are using it as a roadmap, which makes me very proud. Um, but that's the goal. And then SATMF honestly was my rant against scaled agile framework. I hate SAFe a lot, but if you go to satimf.com, if you've suffered under SAFe or any other big agile scaling thing, I think that it will amuse you.
I'll link the website into the description so you all can check it out, understand what the pain problem was actually to come up with the SAR DevOps. It was fun talking to you, Bryan. I hope you had a great time as well. And before just we wrap this up, do you have something as a personal insight that you want to share with our audience?
Do I have something? What? I'm sorry.
Do you have any personal insights or personal stories or any tips that you want to share with our audience?
Oh, it, I'm not sure. I was. I think that it's important people understand that all of these things we talk about are not like talents; they're all skills, and that if you stop learning, you're gonna be hurt pretty badly. And I know that because I stopped learning for a while earlier in my career, and it was not good. Um, the other thing is that when I started looking more broadly than my coding task, when I started looking at how do we do this better, that was a career trajectory moment. Okay, so if you look outside, what you're doing and figure out why, then look at the broader context of why things are the way they are. Don't accept bad in your life. Figure out why it's bad and then make it better. And you'll get recognized for it.
That's a great advice. Cool. So today we'll wrap this up. Once again, thank you, Bryan, for joining in, and see you soon.
Yep, thanks so much. So you work in